Okay, so this is going to be a relatively simple video. I'm actually, as you can tell, making it in podcast format just to save myself some time. I'm actually surprisingly busy this week aside from video making. I don't really see the need to include a lot of visuals in this one. That's part of the reason I decided to do it this way. If I come across something that I think would be aided by a visual, I'll still stick it in here. Otherwise, I'm just going to put up each point in text so that you guys can read along with me. This is my top 10 unanswered questions left unanswered by the series finale of Star vs. the Forces of Evil, or just my top 10 post-Cleaved questions. If you guys haven't checked out my review of Cleaved yet, definitely go check that out. I'll put it up in the little corner doohickey right now, and at the end of the video if I remember to as well, because this video isn't really going to deal with any of my direct opinions of the episode itself, and for context it will help for you to know where it is that I'm coming from in terms of how much I liked the episode and what I felt was wrong with it. That said, if you have been following my Star vs. reviews for this season, then this first unanswered question probably won't come as a surprise to you, and that's, was all of this Glossoric's endgame? Like, it's been hinted, especially this season, that Glossoric, with all of his vast knowledge and abilities, has been manipulating things such as to direct events towards a specific outcome that he seemed to find preferable. So, was this his endgame? Is this what he wanted to happen? Did he want the magic dimension to be destroyed and whatever happened after that specifically to happen? Is this really the event that all of his machinations have been leading up to? It's implied that he agrees that magic is more trouble than it's worth. After all, one of his children actually says that in Cleaved, that being Hecapoo, she straight up says that she's always had the feeling that magic is more trouble than it's worth. I guarantee that if this really is the end game that Glossoric was building to, that sentiment came from her father. And a lot of you guys are going to be saying, well, yeah, obviously this is the end game that he was building to, but I do have trouble believing that. He just doesn't seem like the wants to die kind of guy to me, and there is evidence against that. Primarily, number 9, if this was Glossoric's endgame, then why did he give magic to the Mumins in the first place? Like, yeah, they came through the magic dimension to get to Muni. Maybe that would have given them magic potential in and of itself, and then they eventually would have found out how to tap the magic dimension themselves without him giving them the wand. Maybe giving them the wand tied him to the royal family and allowed him to maneuver himself into a position to maneuver them into the position to do this. But there had to have been a better way to go about it. If his motivations really were to end magic because it's more trouble than it's worth, then doesn't that imply that he cares about people's suffering and their well-being? Like, if he didn't, wouldn't he be more concerned with his own continued existence than ending magic and protecting people by doing so? So let's say hypothetically, and this isn't one of the 10 questions, by the way, let's say hypothetically he did give the first Mumin Queen the wand so that he would become linked through his involvement to the royal family and could manipulate them into position for all this to happen. Then why didn't he just use his role as an advisor to manipulate one of the queens and some of her magically trained family members into going into the realm of magic protected by Glossoric's magic pudding as Star and Marco were, and saying the whispering spell there and destroying magic much earlier in the timeline, preventing a lot of the pain and the suffering which happened as a result of the many human monster conflicts. Like, we're granting here that he needed to give someone access to the magic dimension in order to then manipulate them, maneuver them into position to destroy it. But you can't convince me that someone as all-seeing as Glossoric couldn't have found some way to do this much earlier in the timeline and still have things work out roughly as they have worked out in this scenario, the one which actually showed up in the show. Maybe it had to be Star and Eclipsa to magically inclined people with incredibly high magical potentials. 3 people with incredibly high magic potentials, if you count Meteora, who was involved in the process as well, and who he did train for this moment. But still, I wonder if there wasn't a better way. And I guess that's what question number 9 rounds out to be. Why couldn't Glossaric find a better, simpler, less harmful way of going about this? I do actually have some ideas as to what exactly the shape of his endgame scheme was, so I am going to do a theory on that at some point. I just want to make it clear that that's going to be a lot of speculation. The episode and this past season didn't really do a very good job of explaining all of this, and so I do count it as an unanswered question, and a pretty important one too, since it took up so much airtime this season overall. Which brings us to number 8. How did Star know that saying the whispering spell in the magic dimension would do that? And also number 7, they're kind of tangentially linked, so I'm going to lump them in together. How did it do that? Like, how did it specifically do the things that we saw it do? And I'm not just meaning the whispering spell at this point, I mean the entire process. How did it do what we saw it do? Specifically, this right here. Why does this look like that? Why does Eclipsa washing off the dark magic from her body cause the magic water that it seeps into to become sickly green, corrupted magic rather than dark magic, as it did when Moon did the same thing? It really does feel like there was supposed to be some more lore in here, which filled in the gaps, explaining why Star thought that the whispering spell would work to do this in the first place, and better explaining dark magic versus corrupted magic, and therefore making this scene here seem a little less, I think, utterly ridiculous, as it betrays the visual continuity of the show. And because it feels that way, I count both of these things as pretty major unanswered questions, honestly. The whispering spell, as far as we know, only destroys the wand. Like, maybe because it can destroy the mill horse in the wand at any given time. That's what caused Star to think that it might work on the magic dimension itself. But that's, I think, a bit of a stretch. And always, up to this point, dark magic and corrupted magic have looked very different, and yet here they're treated like they're somehow the same thing. But then, again, they're also not, because when one of those dark magic mill horses is exposed to corrupted magic, it becomes corrupted and dies. So are they the same or are they not? Why does it look like this? It just doesn't make sense. Number 6, did Star actually realize all of the lives that she would be sacrificing if she went through with this? Now, this is assuming the worst case scenario, that all magic spells were destroyed by this, which is only really a problem because so many of the magic spells that we have seen in this show are known to be sentient creatures in and of themselves. So, assuming this worst case scenario, if all of those sentient embodiments of spells were destroyed when the magic dimension was destroyed, does Star realize what she did? Does she realize that she killed all of those people in order to pull this off? And doesn't that make her just as bad as Mina? Didn't she commit genocide in order to achieve her own ends, just as Mina tried to do? Now, that's question number 5, by the way. That's 2 more that I think are inextricably linked, so I kind of stuck them together again. I promise not all of them will be like that. Number 4 is, why didn't the Firstborn send Tom back to Muni? I mean, yeah, it made for a really dynamic scene, Marco fighting against his one true soulmate, Tom, having to become comfortable with his own style of magic on the fly in order to defeat him. But I just don't buy that for a cool scene is the best reason to do something in your show, especially not in a finale which is attempting to wrap up so many plot threads. Like, I will freely admit that asking this question does stem from the fact that I wanted to see Tom participate in the events leading up to the finale, as well as just in the finale. But still, I wish it made more sense, so I am asking. Number 3 is, what memory exactly did Star and Marco lose when their souls were severed by the severing stone? There's actually a theory going around as to what this is, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, as I do intend to cover that theory at some point on the channel. But the show never actually answered this question. They left it hanging as a question, implying that it was a question that they were going to answer, and they never actually answered it, at least not in a way that made it obvious. And I think, again, if you guys have been following my reviews this season, you guys know that I was kind of annoyed by the way that entire plot line ended. I thought it ended very suddenly. So the fact that it wasn't adequately explained, in my opinion, is also frustrating to me, and it makes the list on those merits alone. Number 2 is Marco still injured after being stabbed in the gut by one of the evil mill horses? Like, they completely gloss over it. They draw our attention to it, show us that he was indeed stabbed, and then they just ignore it from then on. Are we supposed to assume that he was only, like, stabbed magically, and that when magic died, the injury went away for some reason? I mean, the horn is still a physical horn that physically punctured his body, and yet he's perfectly fine later. He's even able to flip a frickin' horse, which should be impossible for a human to do. I'm going to let that slide because it was bitchin'. It almost felt like there was supposed to be another act to this episode, which drew out that big conflict in the magic dimension a bit more and fleshed it out, and that Marco getting injured was just a holdover from that. And if that's the case, it should have just been cut altogether. He should have just not been injured, because now I'm forced to ask the question, is Marco doomed to die because of this gut injury? And if not, why? What logical reason is there for that injury not to affect him anymore? I can't really think of an answer which would satisfy me, honestly. And then finally, at number 1, keeping in mind that these are not the only questions that this episode left hanging, dangling out there, like so many unresolved plot threads. These are just my top 10. Number 1 is, what exactly did Star do? Like, we still see monsters running around, and giant animals, and magical creatures running around, and we see that Ponyhead can still float. Like, there's all kinds of stuff going on in that end scene that just doesn't make sense if there isn't still some form of magic existing within at least some of these creatures. Like, there's no conceivable biological function which would let a severed horse head that doesn't even have a place to put its stomach actually survive and even levitate around. That just doesn't make sense without magic somehow fueling Pony's existence. And the same could be said about a lot of the monsters with more unusual anatomies, as well as beings like Tom, who seem very magical in nature, even heralding from a place which seems very magical in nature. Without any magic of any kind, the existences of those people in that place and the existence of the place itself would change on a fundamental level, and that doesn't appear to be what happened. So, is not all magic destroyed? Is it only magic that derives specifically from that one dimension? Does that mean that magic as a concept still exists in another form, and that maybe the characters will learn to tap it again in a different way down the line? After all, it did seem like Star and Marco still managed to draw magic out of themselves or each other, or one or the other, in order to do that big portal-y thing at the end, even though magic had already been completely corrupted, theoretically preventing magic from being cast at all at that point. So if that's the case, what did Star actually achieve? And on that same note, what did she do in regards to the dimensions themselves? Did she only merge Echo Creek with Muni? Did she merge the Earth's dimension with Muni's entire dimension? Did she merge all of the dimensions together? I have no idea. I have no idea exactly what form this world has taken at this point. The episode could not make it any less clear. And frankly, I'm boggled by the logistics of all of these people trying to make lives for themselves in this new world, whatever it is. I think based on what Star did, destroying the dimension which seems to exist between other dimensions means it's most likely that all dimensions merge together, but I almost hope that they didn't, even though that would be really cool on a conceptual level, because that just means more and more different types of people all forced suddenly to exist together, and the more different kinds of people you've got in a situation like that, the more conflicts are going to arise, and I don't want these characters to have to deal with any more conflicts right now. They've already been through enough. I mean, yeah, there's not really anything more I can say about it. This one bugs me the most because I feel like it's the one that was answered the most poorly in the show itself, and the one which we also have the least amount of evidence regarding what actually happened to form an actual theory or opinion about it ourselves. It almost feels like we would have needed an entire 5th season of this show just to explain to us, just to show us what the new status quo is for all of these people. We're never going to get that, and I am super bummed about it. But since I don't really have anything to say beyond that, I'm just gonna end this video here. As per usual, guys, I'd like to know, what did you think of any of the ideas that I put forth in this video? If you have any potential answers to the questions that I asked, please let me know in the comment section down below, or if you have your own questions which you feel were left unanswered by the series, I'd like to hear those too. So yeah, comment below or over on my Discord, link in the description. But either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.